Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Out. That's right. We're going to talk about the hypothesis. That's cool, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's cool. And this is the show number. What show number is this? I'll tell you. Oh, here we go. Hey, Opa. 709. Show number 709. Topic is the hypothesis. We are going to go right into it. But before I do that, please do anything really to our shorts or videos. Please come along and look at the long form as well. Some good stuff there, I think. But the shorts are fun. The shorts are always fun, of course. But the station, again, all the hosts here are doing it pro bono, gratis, for free. So please do come along and donate if you can, or tell people about the station. Tell people about Dave and I and Shiny Side Out and Plato's Cave. All right, enough self-promotion here. The hypothesis. Again, the hypothesis is a cosmology that I've been working on for a part of, and in anger for the last 20 years, because things didn't make sense to me, right? As you can imagine, I've always believed that civilizations existed before ours that were at least as high, if not higher, in their achievements. Different tech, yes. Different philosophy, different science, yes. Different energy sources, yes. All of that, but at least as high, if not higher, and absolutely comparable to our achievements. But then I asked myself, why do they vanish? Why do they seemingly implode, as it were, right? Well, there could be different reasons for this. But this brought about the thinking of the hypothesis. So, I started putting together things, and the show allowed me 13 years ago now, actually, to spend more time researching certain areas and write it down, etc. Now, the show notes for the hypothesis comprise of 102 A4 pages, going across a whole bunch of different topics, hopefully in a fashion that is easy to follow as we come to our conclusions and epiphanies that we share with you, of course. One of the most important things in it are ancient texts, ideally primary sources, right? Sumerian cuneiform, I'm thinking here, but any primary source is really awesome if you can get to it. And one of the most important ones is the Atrahasis epic, of which I'm going to share things with you. Now, bear in mind, this was written thousands of years ago, right? But the story itself, is most likely much older. But it was written down, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years ago, right? But it could go back much, much further in history. And if you look at the king lists of the Sumerians, where you see kings and god kings, for that matter, reigning for tens of thousands of years, then you have to ask yourself, well, is our view of time, is our view of lifespan, is our view of the natural order of things the correct view? Okay. And the answer must be no. Already, we are talking about extending our lives by hundreds, if not thousands of years. New technology, I mean, let's leave. I'll talk about the real breakthrough stuff in a second, but even simple stuff like nanotech, right? And the latest biotech, having little nanobots in your body, potentially getting rid of cancer cells, for example. Using mRNA to engineer new vaccines to get rid of viruses and diseases, conditions that we are suffering from. Okay, robotics, as your body gives in, your joints, your bones, even your organs could be replaced by either biological or mechanical or cybernetic substitutes. He's got an artificial hip, for example. Another one of my friends, he's got a little heart rhythm because he's got a heart condition which potentially requires his heart to be jump-started from once in a while, right? Lucky they found the condition. So it is really astounding what we have achieved and what we can do. And then some of the things, and I'll share this today with you in this text here that I'm going to share with you, are only becoming obvious to us that we are reading them with modern eyes. Right? These ancient stories, sometimes fairy tales, when we read them with our modern mindset, then we'll go, yeah, of course, it makes perfect sense. I'll give you a few examples here as well. In Arabian Nights, right? Ali Baba follows these 40 thieves to a cave, and the captain or the chief of the bandits goes to the cave entrance and says, "Open sesame," and lo and behold, the cave door opens. Ali Baba promptly forgets which grain it was used, but never mind. But it's a simple voice command. We can do this today. In fact, we've got doors that open on our approach, right? Automatic doors, right? That's not amazing anymore. That's just everyday stuff. We've got stairs that transport us up and down without us expending any energy. Escalators. We've got elevators that can propel us to a height of several hundred meters without expending any effort. We fly around the world. We go underwater. Okay? We have technology at our fingertips. We've got most of us have a supercomputer in our pocket. An oracle with all knowledge. And we don't think about it much because that's just what we have. But if you read these ancient stories in light of modern achievements, they're not so fantastical anymore. It's just regular stuff that we have today. And if we don't have it yet, we'll have it soon. Okay? We'll have it soon. And the really outstanding stuff, of course, is the telomere and telomerase kind of treatment options that we have now that can arrest and maybe even reverse the aging process. CRISPR, that lets us edit our genome in vivo. You can go to a living person and alter the genome. You can alter the DNA. You can take out. Soon, but theoretically, you should be able to take out, I don't know, any kind of malfunction in your DNA, any cancer, anything. We are at the threshold of things that even a few years ago we would have thought fantastical and completely unachievable. But we're there today, and we're getting there faster and faster every year. Okay? That's a fact. That's a fact. Okay, so now why is this Ahasu's epic so important? Because I want to read a few things talk to it, but I want you to listen to it with your modern ears. When the gods instead of man did the work, bore the loads, God's load was too great, the work too hard, the trouble too much. The great Anunnaki made the Igigi carry the workload sevenfold. Anu, their father, was king. The gods had to dig out canals, had to clear channels, the lifelines of the lands. The gods dug out the Tigris River and then dug out the Euphrates. Now, these are the two headwaters that spring from Turkey and are really responsible for the Fertile Crescent that you have in Mesopotamia, right? The two-stream land, as it's called, as well. And here we are learning that these were actually channels deliberately dug by the Anunnaki, and in fact by the Igigi, who are clearly the working class, if you will, of these gods, right? So not a different race of people, the same race of people, because it says here the gods had to dig out the canals, so it's hard labor. Okay, and the Anunnaki must have been the management class, like something like that, or maybe they had a completely different system to what we have. I'm just, spitballing here. They were counting the years of loads. For 3,600 years, they bore the excess, hard work, night and day. They groaned and blamed each other, grumbled over the masses of excavated soil. So for 3,600 years, they worked. And you can imagine if you have to dig out two rivers, that's, I can see how that would be, right? And look, were they doing other things? I will say yes. If you look at the monolithic structures that are left all over the world, strewn about, as it were, then one could argue that these Igigi and Anunnaki probably did a lot more than just dig out these two rivers. But essentially what happens here, we're getting to the first labor dispute that we know of, at least in written form. So what the Igigi said was this: let us confront our Chamberlain and get him to relieve us of our hard work. Come, let us carry the Lord, the counselor of the gods, the warrior from his dwelling. Then made his voice heard and spoke to the gods as brothers. The gods listened to his speech, set fire to their tools, put aside their spades for fire, their loads for the fire god. They flared up. When they reached the gate of warrior Elil's dwelling, it was night, the middle watch. The house was surrounded. The god had not realized when they reached the gate of warrior Elil's dwelling, it was night, the middle watch. Echo was surrounded. Elil had not realized. My lord, your house is surrounded. A rebel is running around your door. Elil, your house is surrounded. Nusku barred his door, took up his weapons, and stood in front of Elil. Right? Nusku made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Elil. Oh my lord, your face is sallow as tamarisk. Why do you fear your own sons? So we are reminded here that the Igigi and the Anunnaki may be separated by, I guess, a generational system. Maybe we should think of the Anunnaki as the elder and the Igigi as the younger generation. It seems. Right? So they've come to his house to potentially say, hey, we're working too hard. It's just too hard. And then I'm going to just summarize here what he says. And Elil, who was clearly somehow in charge of security for this workforce and making sure they're working, why have they come here? He says, am I going to fight them? There's a rebel running around my door. Why are you here? Okay, so Elil says, come, Nusku. Open your door, take up your weapons, and stand before me. So Nusku opened his doors, took up his weapons, and went before Elil in the assembly of all the gods. He bowed, then stood and told the message. And this is the message. Your father Anu, you counselor warrior Elil, you Chamberlain Ninta, and your canal controller Inugi. Now this is interesting. This is like a job. There's a canal controller in Nugi. This is not just some kind of mythical nonsense. These are jobs. And okay, let me go on. Have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rebel? Who is in charge of the fighting? Who declared war? Who ran to the door of Elil? So he's addressing the Igigi here. And then there's a bit of missing text, but it says here's this. Every single one of us declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It's killing us. Our work is too hard. The trouble is too much. So every single one of us gods has agreed to come. Nusku took his weapons, went, and returned to Elil. Elil listened to that speech. His tears flowed. Elil spoke guardedly, addressed the warrior Anu. Noble one, take a decree with you to the sky, show your strength. While the Anunnaki are sitting before you, call up one god and let them cast him for destruction. Anu made his voice heard. Anu spoke to the gods, his brothers. What are we complaining of? Their work was indeed too hard. Their trouble was too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough. We kept hearing the noise. So Elil sends Anu to talk to, I guess, the Anunnaki assembly, if you will, and says, hey, yeah, I mean, we asked too much of these Igigi. The younger generation, again, I assume. Okay? We should have been more cognizant of the fact just how hard their work was. But we weren't. Okay? Now, then it becomes a bit more complex. Now, apparently, while the Anunnaki are assembled, this might be the ruling body here, and why Belet Ili, womb goddess, is present, and we'll talk about her in a second, call up one and cast him for destruction. Okay? And again, Anu, your father Anu, your counselor warrior Elil, have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rebel, who is in charge of the fighting? Which god started the war? A rebel was running. Ea made his voice heard and spoke gods his brothers. Why are we blaming them? Their work was too hard. Their trouble was too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough. We kept hearing the noise. Okay? Belit Ili, the womb goddess, is present. This is important. Let her create a mortal man, so that he may bear the yoke. So that he may bear the yoke, work of Elil. Let man bear the load, gods. Now, Belet Ili, the womb goddess, is present. Let the womb goddess create offspring, and let them bear the load, gods. They called up the god, asked the midwife of the gods. Goddess is the midwife of. Why is Mami? So clearly, Belet Ili is also called Mami. You are the womb goddess, to be the creator of mankind. Create a mortal that he may bear the yoke. Let him bear the load of the gods, the Elil. Nintu made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods. On the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, I shall make a purification by washing. Then one god should be slaughtered, and the gods can be purified by immersion. Nintu shall mix the clay with his flesh and blood. Then a god and a man will be mixed together in clay. Let us hear the drumbeat forever after. Let a ghost come into existence from the god's flesh. Let her proclaim it as a living sign. And let the ghost exist so as not to forget the slain god. They answered yes in the assembly, the great Anunnaki who assign the fates. Now what did we just witness here? They're talking about clay and things like that. And clay is always associated with the earth. In fact, in Greek mythology, one of the Titans, I think, that Hercules was fighting, always gathered his strength when he was thrown to the ground, because Gaia, his mother, provided him with strength. every time he fell. So Hercules just held him up and beat him by not having him touch the ground to regain his strength. But always, people of Earth have been associated with the Earth, like the clay, dirt, if you will. And in fact, that's how the Bible puts it well. So it seems here that they've taken biological genetic material from a god, from Anunnaki, and mixed it with, I guess, what we call an earth-bound human creature, or a creature more erectus, maybe or whatever, and then combine the DNA. There it is. Nintu shall mix the clay with DNA. That's very clear. Now, I don't know why they're talking about one god that needs to be slaughtered. Is it maybe a poor translation or poor understanding of the word, in the sense that I imagine the god was chosen to be the donor here for the DNA, would have to give blood, maybe bone marrow, or whatever the case may be, whatever works best, in order to be mixed with the local DNA, right? And we understand it, but slaughtered rather in the sense of, we'll have to do injury to your body and get, blood or whatever out of it in order to mix it with the local DNA. And they answered yes in the assembly, the great Anunnaki who assigned. So they said, yes, let us do this. Let us create this man, or this hybrid creature, which is now going to. And so the Atrahasis epic carries on. I have carried out perfectly the work that you ordered of me. You have slaughtered a god together with his intelligence. I have relieved you of your hard work. I have imposed your load on man. You have bestowed noise on man. You have bestowed noise on mankind. I have undone the fetter and granted freedom. They listened to the speech of hers and were freed from anxiety and kissed her feet. We used to call you Mami, but now your name shall be Mistress of all gods. Clearly what she did was phenomenal, right? She had created this hybrid creature. Now, carry out the work, and the Igigi no longer do that. Okay? Far-sighted Enki and wise Mami, clearly, I guess, the strategic Enki, ahead, and also wise Mami, who has got the knowledge to do all this, they went into the room of fate. This is interesting. The room of fate. I really do wonder what the original Sumerian word means. Right? Or if there's another meaning. Because it's a room of fate. Could it be a room of knowledge? Could it be a scientific lab? I don't know. But it says the room of fate. Now, again, I don't know that particular word is translated from. But the text goes on to say this. The womb goddesses were assembled. He trod the clay in her presence. She kept reciting an incantation, for Enki staying in her presence made her recite it. When she had finished her incantation, she pinched off 14 pieces of clay and set 7 pieces on the right and 7 on the left. So clearly there's some kind of process here, right? And maybe she's giving voice commands to a computer or something like that, or to some other machinery. And when she had finished with that, she took 14 pieces of this mixture, clay. This is obviously now the DNA that had been, hybridized, and set 7 pieces on the right and 7 on the left. Between them, they put down a mud brick. She made use of a reed, opened it to cut the umbilical cord, called up the wise and knowledgeable womb goddesses, 7 and 7, 7 created males, 7 created females. For the womb goddess is creator of fate. And then there's text missing. But just recently, I think it was the Chinese that invented an external womb, which apparently is capable of carrying a fetus to term. So let's look at this with modern eyes. You've got a scientist here, Mami, and you've got, I guess, a strategic leader maybe the head of a council or whatever, Enki, and they went into the lab. The machines and maybe other scientists, ladies were assembled, but these machines, these womb goddesses as well, they were now used to incubate the genetic hybridized material, 7 and 7, 7 males and 7 females, right? And there's this, they had clearly some other machinery or instruments as well, which are here described as bricks and reed and so forth. So what we're seeing here is a fairly good description of what genetic engineering might look like, right? So it's really, in modern terms, what we're seeing here is the hybridization of species, creation of a new hybrid species that can now take on the work, artificially created in artificial wombs, carried to term there, and then taken out. Okay? The womb goddesses were assembled, and Nintu was present. They counted the months, called up the 10th month as the term of fates. Now, 10th, I guess this is carrying the fetus to term. 10th month. She slipped in a staff and opened the womb. Her face was glad and joyful. She covered her head, performed the midwifery, put on her belt, said a blessing. She made a drawing on flour and put down a mud brick. Now, what that means, I have no idea, but clearly she made some kind of notations into something, and maybe the mud brick is some kind of recording device, I don't know. But she performed the midwifery, which means she delivered the child or the children. Okay? She slipped in a staff and she opened the womb. So clearly she unlocked this artificial womb and took out the babies. Okay? That's what's being described here. Very, very plainly. Now, this text predates the Bible by thousands of years. And the Bible has simplified this to, God made us from the earth, from clay, whatever. And then he also made Adam a wife after a while, out from his rib, etc., etc. And okay, but it's the same story, more or less, but much simplified. The biblical story, in my opinion, is a children's story. It survived because it was told like a children's story, rather. Do you know what I mean? So the essence survived. This original text, the original text, was a lot more complex and carried a lot more information. But then what happened? 600 years, less than 600 years passed, and the country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their racket. Elil had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great god. The noise of mankind has become too much. I'm losing sleep over their racket. Give the order that the Surupu disease shall break out. Now, Surupu disease, I looked up and translated, means frost. Cold. Surupu. So, did he give them the common cold or flu? Okay. I don't know. But essentially what happened, so after 600 years, clearly human beings had multiplied, etc., and maybe had now become a nuisance. They're too noisy, making maybe too much of a racket, maybe they're creating too much garbage, I don't know. But it was bothering these gods. Right? It was bothering. The noise was bothering them. Maybe they used to quiet and solitude and meditating, I don't know. But it had become a problem. And he decided, let's give them this disease. Okay. Now there was one Atrahasis whose ear was open to his god Enki. He would speak with his god, and his god would speak with him. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to his lord. How long will the gods make us suffer? Will they make us suffer illness forever? Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. Call the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your own house. Let the heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses, but search out the door of Namtra. Bring as baked loaf into his presence. May he be shamed by the presence. So the presence. And wipe away his hand. The elders listened to his speech. They built a temple for Namtara, and the heralds proclaimed. They made a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their god. They did not pray to their goddess, but searched out the door of Namtara, brought a baked loaf into his presence. Flour offerings reached him, and he was shamed by the presence and wiped away his hand, and the Surapur disease left him. The gods went back to their regular offerings. So clearly, these are not mythological classic flesh and blood creatures that got annoyed with the newly minted human beings they had created, gave them a disease, and then best way to counter that, it seemed, was to bring gifts to those that had, in fact, unleashed the disease and shame them into making them all better, to wipe away as the syrup. And again, this translates to frost or cold, which I think may mean, I'm not saying it is, maybe the flu, maybe the cold, maybe something. Okay. But wait, there's more. There's more. Now, this was the Epic of the Rahaz abridged, and I didn't read everything in it. It's very long, but I read, I think, the most pertinent components of it. Very important stuff, again, in my opinion. If you feel the same way, I really do believe quite important stuff. So, what is more? A further component part of the hypothesis is that fact that some members of these high civilizations have survived to the present day. I'm talking about personal immortality. That's right. Rather than bloodline. But naturally, there seem to be bloodlines connections as well, with the same families and groups of people ostensibly appearing in charge of running civilization, and by extension us. Their chattel, their sheep, their flock, whatever you want to call it even goes into our religion. In the three as prominent religions in the world right now, the Abrahamic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, people are viewed as a flock of believers, but the flock nonetheless. To be guided by a shepherd, to be looked after by a shepherd, to be exploited by a shepherd, because why does a shepherd keep sheep? Not to the only purpose the sheep serve in the shepherd's life is to afford the shepherd a living, be it through shearing their wool or eating their flesh or whatever it is. Okay, the shepherd is not a selfless creature that only has the best interest of the sheep in mind. Full stop. Just not. Okay? No. Get that out of your head. That's not the case. All right? A shepherd keeps sheep to shear or to eat and to have more sheep. Right? And that's why I think the description or the description of the terminology religions use is so appropriate. We are the flock. We are the flock. But what does that mean? Again, we are there to be exploited. We are the resource, the raw material. Okay? And that's a mindset that we've had drilled into our head for thousands of years now. Different to the Eastern religions, very different. Western, and especially the Abrahamic religions, are looking at us as raw material, a flock of sheep. Yeah, And there are these stories of the lost sheep and all these wonderful things there. That's great. But ultimately ask yourself, what is the fate of sheep? What is their fate? A, to be shorn. B, to reproduce. And C, to be slaughtered. Maybe milked for cheese. Sure enough, that too. Now, if you're born into power, it affords you certain things. One, a different view of the world, which while appearing callous, merely reflects the position of power that is held. Two, the view that small lives and small people do not matter. Three, strategic thinking in favor of tactical thinking, to the point of centuries and millennia rather than years and decades. If you are part of a power structure, and you're at the apex of it, and you've been at the apex of it for a long time, you or your family or whatever, and you've been born into that, you view the world fundamentally differently because you're educated differently. You've got every privilege, every advantage that you could possibly want. You do not view people as people. You truly look at them as flock, as raw material, as resources. Not as people. Not as people. This would of course be exacerbated if those powerful personages also happened to be immortal. Human lives would truly just seem like ants. Or mayflies. Right? If you were immortal, or lived for a very long time indeed, let's say tens of thousands of years, for argument's sake, or hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. And to be clear, this is not some kind of crazy fantasy I'm espousing here. It is quite possible, okay, that can be achieved. And the various, we already see the starting blocks, the starting steps being taken right now in our time. We can already see that. Okay? We are talking about the almost, within reach immortality or longevity, certainly. And of course, you don't want to live a long life and be sick. That's stupid. You want to live a long life and be healthy. Right? Now, bear with me for a second. Now, what is the motivation for the super rich and powerful? And it must have been the same throughout the ages, in ancient times, before written history, etc. What is their motivation? Okay. Now these super powerful and super rich, the agencies within the box that have gleaned the nature of the box and are using it to their own advantage. So these are, as I said before, we're all in a box. This is the foundations of the hypothesis, and most of us don't know it. Okay, but we are nonetheless caught in this box here, right? But these entities realize need. What is the motivation for the super powerful and the super rich? First up is control and status quo. If you are at the top of any power structure, your very first agenda item must be maintaining the status quo and controlling the power distribution. Okay? And you do that through a self-perpetuating stability. You create a system that is ideally self-perpetuating, right? Through education, through religion, any which way you want. But the less work you have to do to maintain it, the better. Okay? What else would you like? Well, I can guarantee you that you would like personal immortality. For sure. For sure. Nobody wants to die. Not really. And when I say personal immortality, again, I'm not talking about being old and decrepit. I'm talking about, having a young, healthy body, healthy mind, that will carry you through the ages. Because it's no good being immortal and teetering at the edge of death. That's no good at all, right? And that's really critical to understand. No, but how do you achieve that? How do you achieve that? Right? And like I said before, today our technology is on the brink. It's at the very edge of starting to make that a reality. Others before us surely had the same kind of motivations. And if civilizations like ours existed before, with the same level of technological achievement, albeit different power sources, etc., like I said before, different kind of tech, then it would make sense, because ultimately we're all human beings, right? And the human beings is fundamentally defined by one thing, which is the human condition. So with the human condition, you can always count on certain things about human, right? There's certain basic fundamental motivations that make us tick, especially if you're super powerful and super rich. Now, interestingly enough, we went, the way we are going about it is telomeres, telomerase. We've got CRISPR, a whole bunch of other stuff which might allow us to live for a very long time indeed, going forward. Cancer-free, disease-free, just good quality life, right? Ancient, as well as modern civilizations, revered gold, as well as metals of the platinum group of elements. Why? Why? Gold is pretty useless. It's shiny, it doesn't corrode. Yeah, I give you that. But as a metal for tools, as a metal for anything useful like a weapon, it's completely useless. It's soft. It has to be alloyed with something else before it becomes even close to useful. But it's pretty, it's heavy, and there's a certain fascination that we have with this. Now, the question here is, why do we have that fascination with it? Is it genetic? And I want to say yes. It was bred into us. It was bred into us. Furthermore, ancient gold mines have been discovered that date back thousands and even tens of thousands of years. Okay? And ancient legends speak of gods that created men to specifically mine gold. Yes, to dig those channels, Tigris and Euphrates, but also to mine for gold. Why? Why? Why gold? I mean, if you're talking about, high-tech civilizations, why not rare earth elements, which aren't really that rare, it's just hard to extract. Why not that? Why is gold important? Okay. Now, gold itself, while having non-corrosive properties, and it has many applications in technology today, right? But it doesn't really warrant the almost mystical reverence it enjoys. And again, let me just repeat: one cannot eat it. Hold that thought. One cannot fashion weapons from it. Too soft, like I said. No good as a tool. Again, too soft. It is quite heavy, so also not easily transported. But therein lies the rub, as the great bard tell us. You can eat it. You can eat it. Enter ORME. Orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. Stage right. Potential life extension properties through shoring up telomeres against decay. We think that manna, ambrosia, mifked, the food of the gods as it were, and certain chosen humans, was in fact ORME. Ancient mythologies speak of the elixir of life in connection with gold, and also some specific plants. Almost all ancient cultures place the gods on a mountain or high plain. They all either ingest gold, or liquid white gold, or plant extract to extend their life, and they all treat individual humans with indifference at best. ORME is not only important for life extension, but seems to be, in combination with mercury, to be a powerful fuel or explosive, which seems to have been harnessed by the Nazis and later US and Soviet scientists in covert Black Ops programs. And I urge you to look at the Bell, the Nazi Bell, Area 51, as well as the Red Mercury scare of the 1990s, the Bellotechnic explosives, as well as, of course, Project Paperclip, a program that brought Nazi scientists to the US. The Russians had something similar. They just didn't call it anything. They just nabbed the scientists and dragged them into Russia. That's what happened. They didn't. I don't think they bought the name. Just fine. So this is fascinating stuff. Okay. Now it might even be a catalyst. It certainly was within the Nazi Bell program, and we did a whole show cycle on that. And if you don't know anything about the Nazi Bell, I do urge you to read up on it. It's fascinating stuff, and it may even be connected to the Kecksburg. Now, like I said, it might have even been a catalyst that made time or interdimensional, maybe exploiting flaws within space-time or the ability to open gateways to other dimensions or time streams with a consequentially lost to most of us. The Nazis were also fascinated by ancient sites and what did they know? What arcane cult, ancient civilization, members of secret societies, and funded also factually correct for the most part. The Nazis did try to find the Holy Grail, for example, or the the Staff of Ra, or really any mythological thing. They went to Tibet, they went to Egypt, they went all over the world. In fact, we know that Hitler had possession of the spear of Longinus, which is the spear that was meant to have pierced the side of Christ at the cross. Right? They were really nuts for this kind of stuff. Right? And again, a lot of the Nazis, or the Nazi movement, a lot of that had roots in the occult. There's some really great books written about that. Occult Roots of Nazism is one. Table Talk, Hitler's Table Talk as well. There's interesting, I think it was kind of Rauschenbeck wrote, but there's some interesting information out there that would hint, and in some cases point very clearly at the occult interests that Nazis had. Interestingly enough, they weren't really keen on the Freemasons or any other rival mythological or mythic or esoteric or otherwise, and they shut them all down whenever they could. And I do believe that the Nazis had objectives that ran directly contrary to intentions of the Freemasons, their mission to preserve ancient knowledge, etc. Now, another thing is, and this is slightly off-center, why was Operation High Jump undertaken by the Allies? And is there a surviving ancient base in Antarctica now run by a surviving Nazi scientist? Is that a thing? Antarctica is a really hard place to travel to. Certain people are not allowed to travel to Antarctica. And here's a challenge for you. If you do not believe this, try to go to Antarctica, and not just on a guided tour. You go and try to get to Antarctica on your own and go anywhere you want to go to. Now, bear in mind, it doesn't belong to anyone. There's a number, I think it's like 8 or 9 nations or whatever, that are claiming chunks of Antarctica as theirs. But ultimately, nobody is allowed to settle there. You can't do anything there. You can't dig for oil. You can't have any industry there. Scientific research, yes, but that's it. You're also not allowed to test military weapons, etc. there. None of that. Not allowed to. Not allowed to. So what does that mean? Oh, it means it's a really strange place. And the question is why? Right? Is it possible that some of the Nazis, or even Russian and American or other countries' scientific breakthroughs are not breakthroughs that they discovered, but that they recovered or found in ancient sites. Is it possible they stumbled on things and maybe they still don't know how it works? Maybe. Okay? Look at the Bugosphere. Right? If it is real, that's a big thing. The installation in Siberia, as I mentioned it just recently. Right? What about Shambhala or Shangri-La or Atlantis? And what will we find? Because Antarctica is a continent the size of Australia. Okay, what would we find there? Is it true that it has been under ice for millions of years? Is that true? Now, considering that we are now looking at lifespans that are well beyond what we consider normal, it is quite possible that Antarctica has been under the ice for millions of years and still will yield some remnants of some ancient civilizations and tech. Okay. The gods, I don't like to call them the gods, but it's easier to do it because everybody knows. And they could be terrestrial, they could be from outer space, and we think they've been around for a very long time. That's what we think. A very long time. Okay. And ancient ruins are testament to our capability in the past. Creatively as well as destructively. The temple at Baalbek, Göbekli Tepe, Mohenjo-Daro, the pyramids. Right? And the mysteries are going deeper and deeper. The things we found in Indonesia. This potentially 20,000-year-old step pyramid. I'm going to call it a pyramid. I know people hate that because it's not a pyramid shape. Oh, sure, whatever. And not just Göbekli Tepe, there are other tepes. And we keep finding these things. We keep pushing back the age of humanity, pushing back the age of civilization. Why can't we release all the things that have been found in coal mines by amateurs? Schliemann was an amateur. He found Troy because he followed what Homer wrote. He found Troy. Complete amateur. I've been to Troy in Turkey. Fascinating. We find molten glass layers. The Libyan desert glass, LDG, or great sand sea glass, is an impactite found in areas in the eastern Sahara, in the desert of eastern Libya and western Egypt. Fragments of desert glass can be found over areas of tens of square miles. Distribution, there's a map here as well. I can't really show it to you. Maybe Dave can add it. But there's a distribution of silica glass in the Libyan desert in the 19th. The origin of this desert glass is uncertain. Meteoritic origins have long been considered possible, and recent research links the glass to impact features such as zircon breakdown, vaporized quartz, and meteor impact. Metals and to an impact crater. Some geologists associate the glass with radiative melting from meteoric large aerial bursts, making it analogous to trinitite, created from sand exposed to the thermal radiation of an explosion. Libyan desert glass has also been dated as having 26 million years ago. Like obsidian, it was knapped and used to make tools during the Pleistocene. That's what some people believe. Is it trinitite? Is it the remnant of a nuclear explosion? Ancient texts are quite clear as to what seems to have massive global and maybe even solar system wars, nuclear and other devastating weapons, complete destruction, maybe several times, of the high civilizations that exist. The Younger Dry civilization is just the last one. But the gods survived and started the whole cycle again. Look at the creation myth. Look at the flood and other catastrophe. We're living in a cyclical history. That's the predominant view in the East. And the survivors either went into high places, mountains, or into outer space, which was the Ezekiel experience. right? There's so much. There's so much here, and I won't go any further because the next thing, we're going to discuss with you are the non-physical phenomena. The non-physical. So up till now we've talked about ancient texts and ruins and evidence of floods and other catastrophes, etc. But it was physical evidence. The next bit will be the non-physical evidence. Alright, this is the music. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Shiny Side Out. Please do tune in on Tuesday, when I think Dave will be back. Donate if you can. And please like, comment, or share if you see us out in the wild. But most of all, be safe.